What's going on, everybody? It's Retro JoJo again, back for another video. Just want to kind of talk about something that I recently rewatched, and it's fitting for the season. It's spooky season, Halloween, whatever you prefer to call it. Um, I've always thought of Halloween, just to give a little bit of my take on Halloween. I've always thought uh, it can be fun, you know, without being into the occult and things like that. You can have fun and still retain, that Halloween vibe without all that. Anyway, and you can make it fun for children too and kids. It doesn't always have to be about, you know, gruesome violence and things of that nature, and tons of language, and there's always nudity in most horror movies, but it doesn't have to always be that way. But getting to what I wanted to talk about, which would be, excuse me, three of Rob Zombie's films. A lot of people don't care for Rob Zombie. I like his music, and I do like the way that he directs. I think he does a good job. I think there are a couple negatives. I mean, there's a couple shots where maybe it could have been a little bit of a better angle, maybe, but a lot of that I feel doesn't just come from him. I've heard people say he's like trying to be like, Quentin Tarantino meets like horror, and I get that vibe when I watch his movies. Like it has some of the Kill Bill, but he also does a lot of throwback in all of his movies to, the era in which he grew up in. I mean, he grew up watching all the old school horror, so you're gonna get a lot of that in anything he makes, family friendly or not. It's going to have that feel to it. But starting off would be House of a Thousand Corpses. This is the first movie in the Firefly trilogy, and I just want to, before I talk about it, all of them, I just want to briefly say these movies are not intended for children. They are violent. There's language, but just the story is what I want to focus on. Not necessarily all the bad that they're kind of in the movie. It reminds me a lot of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or like even a little bit like Wrong Turn, but not. His movies are so vastly better than Wrong Turn. I'd rather watch these, that Rob Zombie's, the movies that he's produced, any of them, than to rewatch past Wrong Turn 2. It just anyway, those movies got silly, but anyway, I digress on that. But I do enjoy Rob Zombie's movies, and House of Thousand Corpses starts innocently enough with, you get to meet Captain Spaulding, played by Sid Haig, very well, and he's getting robbed, and he's talking to this other guy, and like I said, it's not family movie, so I'm just forewarning, but and I won't repeat anything that was said in the movie, but it has comedy, and I think that he could have done without some of the language, because it has a very big hillbilly vibe to it when you meet some of the other characters too. But there's a lot there. I mean, you get these teenagers coming there after the robbery had already occurred, and he's got the sign, fried chicken and gasoline, and it really, to me, it gives off a very middle of nowhere kind of family owned, which is what I think that's what Rob was going for. But then he has a murder ride in the back, and the guys were like, yeah, we should check that out, and they do, and there's actually nods to a real life serial killers in it, which is one of the positive. I think the way that he integrated real events with his world, the fantasy world. I think that was pretty neat. Very good touches. Like there's Albert Fish, who, if you know anything about him, he was very sadistic. Me and my friend were talking about this the other day, so shout out to George Mingledorf. We were talking the other day, and we were talking about that during while we're watching the movie, and he taught me some things that I didn't know. So he's very knowledgeable on things like that, and I love watching movies with him because we both sit there sometimes and critique and talk about things like that. But anyway, you get to see kind of he does like black and white scenes and sequences where it's like as he would have looked, or even it might even be found footage. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he had the rights to that or to be able to do that. But then you get to see towards the end, you see Dr. Satan, and he was also. I read it up on this after I watched the movie for like the fourth or fifth time. He was actually a real doctor, and he would get his patients. I believe it was in France, if I'm not mistaken. I know he moved to Paris, but anyway, he was in the army. He was drafted, and then he was already kind of psychotic, and he ended up. What he would do is he would perform surgeries, but he would give his patients like illicit, like bad drugs, things that they probably didn't need to be taken. And I thought that was interesting that he put that into the movie. And then we get to the house because they all want to go see if this myth of Dr. Satan that Captain Spaulding's told him about is really true. But then we find out the family is crazy. You have Otis, you have Baby, played by his wife Sherry Moon Zombie. She does a decent enough job in her acting role. Some of the laughter could have been toned down in that movie a little bit because he does do that later. But overall, it was just okay. You have Hugo, you have Tiny. Love Tiny. I actually recently watched a movie that Matthew, I think it's McGrary. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Played in The Dead Hate the Living, and I enjoyed it. But he does a really good job as Tiny in House of a Thousand Corpses. He was burned by his father Earl. He just went nuts and set the house on fire, and Tiny was stuck inside and got burned. So he's covered all up. He's like 7 foot something. He's a big guy, big, tall, lanky guy. And you have, I think I said Otis. I might have said Otis already. And then you have Mother Firefly and Hugo. And they all play off of one another. And it's very interesting. Anyway, there were other people that were being murdered. Sheriffs go out and investigate. They are murdered. And you start seeing how this family's all connected, like to Captain Spaulding and other characters. I don't want to spoil too much, but they get, tortured and they get killed. And towards the end of the movie, one of the girls makes her way into a crypt of sorts, and it ends up being the lair of Dr. Satan himself. And he's like held up by these like almost like a marionette, like a puppet, and it's like holding him up because he's so old and thin, but he was still performing surgery on one of her friends. And in this movie, his kind of goal, as a whole, it was to, I guess, like make a army or corpses of the undead, but they were still really alive. They weren't zombies, but they were zombified, kind of like like a lobotomy of some sort, like like top of the head being kind of like in Silence of the Lambs. Shout out to that movie. That's what it reminds me of. You got the heads open and exposed, and he's doing surgery on them, and it only shows one person having the surgery done, but it shows other characters, and they're kind of brain dead. They're like eating, and they're like drooling, and they're watching TV, but there's nothing really on it. They're just kind of blank screens, or like the old TVs with have white lines when you didn't have reception, things like that. And then you see Earl at the end of the movie, the father that burned him, and it just ties everything together. She gets out and escapes from him, but he's this huge cybernetic dude with like cybernetic enhanced, like you can see like his vision is like red, and it's feeding him like data and stuff. It's really interesting. I wish we could have seen more of those characters in that movie. I think that's one of the negatives. He focused a lot on the more rednecky Texas Chainsaw type of thing, which is fine if that's what you want to do. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the best horror films of all time, but don't focus just on that. He should have focused on what we were introduced to in the beginning of the movie, in my opinion. Still, I love the movie, but there's not much else I can say about it other than I like Bill Moseley as Otis, and he's supposed to be kind of like Charles Manson. Not really though. I mean, they're all supposed to be kind of like real life serial killers. That's the whole point of this series. And but yeah, and the girl ends up getting drugged back because she gets in the car with Captain Spaulding. So spoiler alert. Just want to put that out there. This is a spoiler alert. So if you want to watch it or have any interest in it, don't you may want to skip ahead or just not watch. But he gets in the car and then Otis is in the back, and then when she wakes up, she's back in the chair at Dr. Satan's, and the movie ends. And it's very, very iconic. I love just the way it built up. A lot of people don't like the movie. They either do or they don't. And me and some of my friends have had differing opinions on it, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether the next one or even the one after that was better. Because I'm going to be focusing on just the three, the Firefly trilogy, and then we'll focus on more of Rob Zombie's work going forward during this season, as well as some other movie reviews. But the second one that I watched was Devil's Rejects. I've seen the Devil's Rejects a couple times. It was actually introduced to me by a friend of mine named Tevin, and that's how I went back and watched House of a Thousand Corpses. All of these movies that I'm talking about, they have language, they have all the things that you would expect of a modern day horror film. But they do make, maybe not for the scenes that might contain like violence, or like if there's a little bit of nudity or something like that. But they do make things called TV Guardians, and if you don't like a lot of language, I think they're closed caption. At least the rated versions are, the rated R versions. There are unrated versions of the latter two. But I believe you can watch House of a Thousand with a TV Guardian, if I'm not mistaken. So if you wanted to watch it, then you cut back on that if that's not what you're in. If it bothers you a lot. I'm just saying, just for anybody who's watching this that bothers them a lot, and it does me. But I think when you watch something, just taking a side street here, when you watch something and the rating, because we have a rating system in the U.S. and I believe all over the world, you know what you're getting into though when you put it in your DVD player. You know what you're watching, so it's not like surprise. I mean, you know what you're getting into though. So anyway, but getting back to Devil's Rejects, it's a good movie. If you're gonna watch it, I believe the R-rated version was toned down a bit. Some of the scenes are toned down in it. There's some things in there that are a little more sadistic than House of a Thousand Corpses that I won't really talk about, because it's really actually the second act is my least favorite part of the movie. A lot of people love that part of the movie. To me, the ending is where it's at for that movie. He did a great job with it, but there were some things in Act 2 that I feel like could have been done without or gone without. But again, he's pushing the envelope, so to speak. That's what he's trying to do. I mean, he's a director, he's a musician, and he's an artist. If you don't like his art or whatever, you don't have to like it or support it or whatever, what have you. You don't have to watch it. But it's all about in the first movie I can't remember his name, but anyway, the sheriff that goes to investigate with this other cop that are killed is actually the new sheriff, which was that's their brothers, and he wants to get back at the Firefly family. So it's more like they're being chased, kind of thing. Instead of it taking place all at the home and in the crypt and things like that, it doesn't take place there. It's all over the place. And he wants revenge. He kills Mother Firefly, and then what I like about what he did with that movie though, with Devil's Rejects, is he starts. They're supposed to, that's why it has that title. They're supposed to be the evil ones, but you start to sympathize with them because this guy has went nuts. I mean, he has completely lost it. Went over the deep end. He in the movie he's drinking excessively. His mind is altered. He's not right. He's driving crazy. Once he kidnaps him, the whole first and second act build up to him. He kidnaps them, Otis, Baby, and Captain Spaulding, and it just kind of divulges from there. He goes back to their home. Uh, he puts nails through Otis's hands. He staples the victims' pictures, which I thought was it was a good touch because it kind of gives that, oh crap, they're human too. They're not immortal. They have a lot of plot armor in these movies, but they're getting hurt, and he's hurting them bad. And he's electrocuting them with a baton, but it's like a taser baton, and it's very how do you say it? It's very hard. It's hard to sit there and not look away from it, but you're kind of like, man, they're supposed to be the main point of this movie, and I like the way that Zombie did that. He gave a good storyline that built up to that point, and then they're the ones that are getting what they deserve. And then he chases her. It's a nod to the first movie, like she does the girl they put in the bunny costume and says "Run, rabbit, run." He does the same thing to her and runs her into this herd of cattle, like their fences and stuff, and she's like crawling through and stuff like that. Again, it has some stuff that I don't find, so don't look at me and say that that's how I am in real life, because I don't find it desirable. I just find it's an interesting movie. They're interesting characters to me. They have a lot of similarities between real life things that we've seen in the real world. Again, they're all fantasy stories. They're not real. I just find it interesting. The main thing about The Devil's Rejects I did like a little bit more, again, is that third act. I don't think we got enough in the first movie of the last two characters that you see, Dr. Satan and Earl Firefly. I don't think you get to see them enough, and I think that was one of the reasons I preferred the ending to the second one. But as far as strong acting goes, Bill Moseley does great as usual. He does have some dialogue, like I said, and some things that I don't really find. It's not interesting, but it's almost like it. I don't know how to put it. In the first movie, he was more just crazy. In this movie, it feels like he's crazy, and like the desire for things that weren't shown in the first movie are more prevalent in the second one. That's just how I feel about it. I mean, yes, he did a good job, but it's all about the script that you're given, I suppose. But yeah, and Sherry Moon did a great job. She wasn't as the Barbie doll sounding, I guess that's how you would describe it, kind of laugh. That's toned down in the second movie, which is a good thing. I like that Rob puts her in his movies. I really do. I'm glad their relationship is that strong where he works with her every time he does a movie. That's great. I applaud him and support him for, he loves his wife that much. He wants her in his movies. They don't want to be apart. That's great. But just do the best that you can to do a good script for her. If she's going to be one of her strong suits and one of her strong characters, and he did that in Devil's Rejects. So I thought that was a very good thing. And Captain Spaulding's always great. And Danny Trejo and Diamond Dallas Page are in it, which are, again, a good wrestler and one of the greatest actors of all time with Danny Trejo. I love Danny Trejo. And he gives them their just desserts. He's hired by the sheriff and wants revenge. And I don't want to spoil too much of it because I've talked about it a lot, but it gets really good. Some people even get killed in the crossfire. Basically, they get, because they were associated with them, so they get what they get. They get what was coming to them too. They weren't invincible because they're, I don't know them. No, if you're there with them, you know them. That's how it was viewed, and I thought that was really good. It set the pace. It kept the pacing going where it didn't just start dragging. Like, oh, I've got to avoid this person to shoot around the corner. No, they just kept shooting. And at the end, they survived the shootout. I don't want to go too much into it, but originally he was going to just end it there. That was it. That was going to be it. Okay, Firefly family, excuse me. Out the window. They're gone. I'm doing something new, and he did for a while. He did some other movies that I'll talk about later. Again, but he ended up coming back a couple years ago, and I didn't even know about it. Again, my friend, a couple of my friends actually told me about it. It was coming out, and they knew that I'd watched the other ones. Just wanted to see what I thought about it before they watched it. They wanted me to watch it first, and I watched the new one, Three from Hell. It's very, how do I put it? It's very empty without Sid Haig as Captain Spaulding. He's in it, but only for like 2 or 3 scenes, and they kill him off in jail because unfortunately he was actually very, very sick at the time of filming, and Rob he wouldn't push him anymore. I mean, he was dying basically. He was just very sick, and Rob chose not to push him any further, over his limit than he already was. So Sid Haig's character, Captain Spaulding, dies, and it starts out kind of like it's almost like what you would see in real life. Like, they're interviewing them, they're talking with them, they're saying crazy off the wall stuff. There's just all kind of stuff going on. There's people saying, free the 3, and they should be out. They shouldn't be in jail and prison or whatever, incarcerated. They should be out, and they should be in the real world with us, because they're I like the way baby moves, and she just got this flow to her and stuff like that. And Otis isn't a bad guy, dating, things like that. And then they bring in, I can't remember his whole name, Night Wolf. The actor that did his part did a good job, but it's just very empty without Sid Haig, I feel. Because him and Otis feel like copies of one another. They feel like they're very, one's one and one's another, but then if you put them together, they're exactly the same person, almost. It's just, sometimes when you watch a movie and there's 2 characters that are too similar, it begins to drag a little bit. And that's unfortunately what happens in this movie. They felt the need to add more scenes where there is just hardly anything going on towards the end, other than a little bit of top half nudity, which I think you can go without that in movies. But they're going to put it in, again, it's an R-rated film, or unrated even if you watch that version of it. It has more of the violence. They don't really tone anything else down in the R-rated, but more of the violence. But I mean, you have a whole family that gets pinned up by Otis and Night Wolf, and it's very, out of the 3, I would say it's probably my least favorite, just because it just kind of drags from the first act to the second act is okay, and then where baby's in jail and they're trying to get her out and stuff like that, it's okay, but it just doesn't have that flow like the first 2, I don't think. And then you have this like death squad that's like, they're like evil, and they come to Mexico because they flee to Mexico, to try to get away from the cops and stuff, because someone seen her kill someone that ran out of the house, and it just kind of drags. You know what I'm saying? You ever see a movie that's like that? That's what I'm trying to say. It just kind of feels like it drags, especially the last act where they're fighting them. It's like stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. And I get you have to have dialogue to make a plot, but I mean, just him shooting into the air and saying every time, you don't answer me talking to Otis, I'm going to shoot bullets into the air, or shoot someone or something like that. And it's just like, you could have did anything else with it. And the classic, they're tied up. The other 2 are tied up. They have to get loose somehow. And they're going to, because they're high-end characters in this story that otherwise the rest of the characters don't matter at all. But anyways, it's a good movie. The guy, like I said, he's just as bad as they are that's after him. It's like a hired, they're like a hired assassination squad, kind of like in Kill Bill, if you've ever seen that. Um, it's just it's okay. And like I said, the ending where he's in coffin and what are they gonna do to him? Oh, I don't know. They're probably gonna set him on fire. Spoiler. And that's exactly what they do. I knew when I watched it the first time, I said, "Yep, they're about to incinerate this dude," and that's exactly what they did. It was very predictable. But at the same time, it was really a good movie because I enjoy it, minus overuse of language. But another movie that I'm going to talk about later, he has proven to us that he can do without all that. So I think it's just because he's telling us a serial killer, psychopaths. They're serial killers. They're psychopaths. They're just crazy people, and they don't have a right mind, and they're not right in the head. There's just something wrong up here. And I feel like that's why he kind of put that together. It could not be a PG-13 movie. It couldn't be a PG movie. And it definitely wasn't a G movie. All of them. It's a sad but sadistic story of, and you can tell because they share moments. I was going to say this in the second film where they get ice cream and things like that. And you can tell that they once were like, I don't know, they had a, like rightness in their, I guess that's the right word to use, in their head, to the point where they could enjoy things because it shows scenes at the end where they're just sitting talking and like, just sitting in the grass before it shows the scene where they supposedly die, but we know they don't now because there's a third film. But it gives a lot to the characters when you realize these people do have feelings, but they wish they didn't because there's just something wrong with them and they don't know what it is. And I think that builds a good story. It's just, it's the same as if you watch something else. You watch The Silence of the Lambs. You watch they have a Jeffrey Dahmer show, and a movie, and just things like that. If you watch stuff like that, you might like this. That's all I can say. It's decent enough. It fills the void where if I'm in a mood for that kind of movie, I'll pop them in. Maybe once a year. Sometimes there would be 2 years before I watch them again. They're just maybe even longer. Because I watched all of them about 4 or 5 times now, and I would still rewatch them. But overall, I think they're watchable. Excuse me, but they're not as watchable as some of the other movies that I really, really like for this time of year. They're good, but they're not. They're kind of in between. If you had a ranking, of like how you would do grades in school, if you had an A to F, I feel like it would be about in between an A and a B. It would be like an A minus. They're good movies, but some of the raunchier stuff and some of the other stuff, you can tell a story without it. But again, it all depends on the director and the direction that they want to go. And if you like the story, then you'll stay for the story. You know what I mean? It's just one of those kind of situations with those movies. But overall, I like them. I have a funny fact just to share this as a closing comment. I actually had my face never had seen the movies before. Never seen any of them. Never seen any Rob Zombie films other than the one about the Salem witch trials, the Lords of Salem. And it was weird to me at first. That's something that maybe I'll talk about. I don't even know if I can review it because it's so different and so strange. But we'll see. Anyway, never seen any of them other than that. And at the point I was like, I think 19 or 20, my parents took me to Mad Monster Party Con, or Party Con, however you say it. Mad Monster Party is a convention. It was in North Carolina, and I got to meet Jeremy Bulloch that played Boba Fett. Rest in peace for Jeremy Bulloch. He passed away a couple years later. I believe it was during the pandemic, unfortunately, just of old age. It wasn't anything, I believe it was old age. But just to be able to talk to him was great. And I got to see a lot of different, because it was like a Halloween type of con. But they had Star Wars stuff, and they had Star Trek stuff, and they had Deadpool stuff, all kind of different stuff. They had Marvel, anything Marvel, DC. They had little, things set up, and you could come by and buy stuff. They had necklaces, keychains, shirts, and I plan to go back to this con sometime or another. Um, because one of the people I want to meet next is the guy that originally played RoboCop, and he's supposed to be at one of the conventions pretty soon. So I may plan to go with me and my wife and all, and it'll just be a good time. But anyway, I got my face painted like Otis, and I'd never seen any of the movies before, and I just remember, it just vividly stands out in my mind. My dad asked me, "What character is that from? What is that from?" And I looked at him. I said, "I don't know." I just thought it looked cool, with a little. It looked like it was painted kind of like a skull, so I just thought it was really cool. And he just gave a good laugh and okay, and it was just good memories like that. Those are the things that I like. I don't like to always dwell on just uh, negative side of things, even with movies, games, TV. And there are certain things, I will say this as a closing comment, there are things that I will not watch. There are things that I think are wrong, especially if you claim to be a Christian, because that's what faith that I follow. Everybody has a right to their own opinion and their own beliefs. I'm not putting this out there to say anything, but there's just some things that I don't really watch, and there's things that I won't watch. Because of just where I stand currently, in my faith and as a human being, I have a right to say no to things, and I have a right to say some things are okay. So and everybody has that right, no matter what you believe. Everybody has that right to say this is okay for me or this isn't, and everyone has to make their own decisions. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, give me a subscribe, and follow for more videos. And I will see everyone next time. Everybody be safe.